So, how do you serve your community? I'm going to be speaking to two guests today whose day to day is all about serving their communities. Welcome, GynoCurious listeners. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Novatt. We are here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Please, if you like what you're listening to today or any of the episodes, please give it 5 stars, share, and give us some comments. And if you have any comments to send directly to me, send it to GynoCurious@gmail.com or comments at radiofreerhinecliff.org. Please, we want to hear your positive, your negative, your criticisms, anything you got to say to us. So, healing comes in many, many different forms. I like to use GynoCurious as a platform to discuss the array of healing modalities, from psychotherapy to physical therapy, from medications to massage and meditation, with surgery and science, but also to talk about the role of education and its impact on healing. I believe that, when you share accurate, up-to-date information with an individual or a community, you are also contributing to their overall healing and health. So that is why I've asked my guests Rayner and Antonia Hughes to join me today to kind of explore the roles of education and how their work at Planned Parenthood of Greater New York helps the folks that they serve. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you could join us. Ashley, let's just start with you. You're a health educator, as I understand. What does that mean on a day-to-day? What do you do?
So I am a health educator. I have been doing this for the past 16 years. It was a role that maybe I didn't see myself in, but now I can't not see myself in. When I was in high school, I had an older friend who was doing community service with Planned Parenthood at the time, and I kind of tagged along, and I did it, and that was that. And then I had moved away, came back, and there was a job opening at Planned Parenthood for a health educator, and I needed a job, and I went right in, and I've never turned back. And like I said, I can't see myself not doing this work. So I am with the teens in the community of Sullivan County, sometimes other areas of the Mid-Hudson Valley. And I am just doing that sexual reproductive health education on a daily basis in schools, in community-based organizations, sometimes in one-on-one settings. I love the work that I do, and I can't really see myself doing anything else.
What a gift that is, right? So many folks are doing work that they don't feel that committed to or passionate about. So I'm so glad for you, Ashley, because I have no doubt that commitment and passion is exuded every time you meet with a student as an individual or in a group. So that's so great. And it reminds me how for so many people who work with Planned Parenthood, for Planned Parenthood, support Planned Parenthood, talk about how one point in time in their early life, they got exposed to Planned Parenthood, and then it became a part of their lives later on as an adult. Antonia, would you say the same thing for yourself, that Planned Parenthood had this kind of personal connection at one point, and then it became a professional one, or no, not really?
For me, I did not grow up with comprehensive sex education. So my experience with comprehensive sex education was really trial and error. I was the person that was trying to figure out my fertility and how to maintain my fertility and how to plan being a parent, right? And so I stumbled across Planned Parenthood just by I need to know what to do for my reproductive health care. And because I was at one point a participant, a patient, as I went to school and I started to grow my academic muscle, I knew that I wanted to be able to change lives in our communities. And I always get really excited about the fact that I'm able to change lives, but those lives that I change, they also change me. They give me different perspective. They give me different viewpoints. They have me question some of the things that I think are my moral compasses. So it really becomes a lifestyle. I'm very comfortable with saying penis and vagina. I think almost sometimes to a default, like everybody's like, I'm like, yes, it's just the penis and a vagina. Like
I
it's
always say
totally
it's like the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the throat. How come we could say that without any hesitation?
absolutely, absolutely. And so I really live by that. I live by making sure that people feel body autonomy. I live by just being empowered wherever people are. I know that in our work, we always say, we meet people where they are. I think it's always important to lift up that sometimes meeting people where they are is uncomfortable for us. And so it has to be mission driven for us to come in and to do this work day in, day out.
So, can you, first of all, can you introduce to the audience what your title is at Planned Parenthood? Because you do something slightly different from Ashley, right?
Yes, I do something a little bit different, but we work for a nonprofit, so we go where the wind blows us. I mean, realistically speaking,
You're
right?
in healthcare too. This is the nature of it.
You listen,
Yeah.
you learn everything from the front end all the way to the back end. That's the way that we work, and that's the way that our community really calls for us to work. I am a comprehensive adolescent pregnancy prevention educator, but I'm also the CAP coordinator. So I do still do a lot. I mean, again, like Ashley said, like once you start to do this work, it's very difficult to pull away. So I started off as a health educator, and then I got promoted to the CAP coordinator, but I still do a lot of education. I have partners that I've been working with for the past 7 years. And it's like when they have a program, it's like, let me come in and just do one module just to stay sharp. Because like you said in the introduction, healthcare is constantly changing, behaviors are constantly changing, attitudes are constantly changing, culture is constantly changing. And so in order for me to really do my job in a meaningful way, I still need to be really connected to community. So on top of being in community, I really do a lot of the admin work. So budgeting, making sure Ashley has what she needs, listening to Ashley when she says like, hey, this is the issue that I'm having in community. So we really work to synthesize the work that we do together.
So great that there's just such a beautiful integration
Mhm.
with what you're describing. This that all these different facets of the organization work together, driven by a mission. And that's something I want to bring up. You raised 2 points that I want to kind of unpack a little bit. One, the issue of how the mission of Planned Parenthood becomes kind of the individual's mission too, and that living the life of an educator in the world of healthcare, I don't care if it's Planned Parenthood or a hospital setting or whatever, if you are truly driven by helping people and educating people, I love that these missions become, personal, professional, community, global, in a way that's so for me, inspiring, particularly in a world that feels so divisive and so angry and changing so fast. So I love that you mentioned mission. It's just so important, right? I don't know that you hear about people's mission anymore, right? It used to be like, why are you doing the work? Because I'm driven to it. It's a calling. I don't hear people using those words anymore outside what you two just described. It's so great.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So the other thing I wanted you to speak about a little bit more, Antonia, and both of you can speak to it, please, is meeting people where they are at. Can you explain that a little bit more to me and to those who are listening, please?
So I have a scenario that I had an experience with. I had a young woman who was living in a household with her dad. Her mom wasn't there, and she was desperately trying to be responsible. And meeting her where she was basically like me having a birth control kit, being on Main Street and doing a birth control demonstration for her, or like meeting her and giving her condoms. And I always want to be really clear because sometimes I think that sometimes as being in community, parents ultimately feel like, I don't want you to teach my kids about sex education. Like I want to do that. And I always say, I commend you for that. Like we want every young person to have a parent that wants to teach them about reproductive health care. The reality is that there are some children, there are some people that don't have access to a caring, loving adult, never mind being a parent. And so for those youth, they have me, they have Ashley, they have the education department, they have outreach because they still need services rendered to them. So I always say we want to make sure that everyone in society gets what they need, and not everyone needs the same thing. So sometimes just being able to have those conversations with parents, and when we're in community, having those conversations with our young people, right? Like, as we always say, Planned Parenthood is here. We live in New York State. We have minors' rights, which means that you guys have rights over your penises and your vaginas. With that being said, we want everyone to have an adult that they can trust, that can help to support them through whatever it is that they're going through. But if you don't, we want to be able to support you. Here's our contact information. Get in contact with us. We will meet you where you are.
Yeah, I love that answer. Ashley, would you speak to some of the obstacles, the boundaries? Because Antonia just pointed out the conflict that sometimes exists, and I have this in my office. I'll have a mom and her daughter come into the office, and you can see the minute they walk into the room that they are not in agreement about what they're there to talk about, and that young teenager will do all she can to get her mother out of the room, and the mother's not leaving the room, and then the mom's mad at me because she feels I'm trying to replace her, and of course I'm not trying to do that at all. I'm just trying to provide information. That's my goal, and to make sure this young lady has all the information she needs to make healthy, safe, wise decisions. And unfortunately, we also know that in this world there are parents who aren't always doing right by their kids, and meaning that there's abuse in the house, or there are just alternative motives to educating their children. So, Ashley, if you would speak a little bit about, what are the obstacles that you guys find on the individual level or community level or on the school level? That would just be so interesting to hear, because I could assume I know what they are, but I bet you there are some obstacles out there that you guys encounter that you're like, wow, I didn't expect that, or this is a little different, or, oh man, this is the thing I encounter all the time. Can you speak to some of that, please?
Sure, yeah. So more often than not, the misconception really is that we are abortion first, and we're really not. We're prevention first education, right? We want to empower everyone and anyone that we work with the education for them to make the safest, healthiest choices for themselves. And really, we just have to go in and break down those barriers and explain that we're doing prevention first education. We're not here to do anything else, right? We want everyone to have the tools to know how they're going to navigate forward, right? And that is often just a simple conversation more often with parents, just saying like, look, this is what we're doing, and you are a part of your child's life, but not everyone has those same circumstances. I mean, even for myself, right? I mentioned earlier, I've been in this work a long time, and my son, who is now 14, I was just invited into his school in the 8th grade classes. And I kept thinking, how am I going to talk to him one-on-one at home, even though I'm the professional in this area, right? And here he was, I got him in the classroom with all of his friends around him. Mm-hmm. And it just happens, and it happens organically. And you have these conversations, even though everyone thinks they know what we do, that's not necessarily the case. And then they see it and they hear it firsthand. And it's almost like a sense of relief, like, oh, that wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And also sometimes having those outside voices, like you mentioned, with the parent not wanting you to ask them to step out for a second. It also just calms the situation down, right? You get to hear from both parties before you hear from everyone together. It's really just opening up lines of communication and being really clear about what we do, because people really don't know what we do more often.
It so reminds me, thank you. It so reminds me of kind of all the assumptions that we make. Like we make assumptions that everybody knows about sex. Well, guess what? We make assumptions that everyone knows about contraception because of the internet. Well, guess what? There are so many assumptions that perhaps more often than not, people who criticize the work that you do and the work that I do, they make assumptions about our message that is, often so incorrect. And that, I'm always reminded in my work when it gets really, really hard that all that matters is that I am serving a woman and that I am there to provide healthcare and education. And that gets really hard sometimes because, again, the world of healthcare is so muddled and overwhelmed by policy and politics and even individual antipathy or assumptions that we're talking about. So, so what happens if you walk into a classroom, for example, where the energy is just like, fists in the air, and they're ready to call you names, if you will. Like, how do you diffuse some of that? Because I imagine it happens, or am I wrong?
I've had some situations here.
And I was going to say, I haven't had necessarily so much where I walk in and they're not supporting it. Usually they're listening, and then the kids can throw out a question at me, and I just give them my honest answer to it, not looking to change their opinion or their thoughts on what they think about Planned Parenthood. I just kind of let them know where I'm at, and it kind of is like, oh, okay, we can both be in the same space, even if we don't agree. But I've never had, usually once we're invited into the school, it's because they are in support of us. And I was thinking about this a little bit more. That's what I really appreciate. The ones that continue to invite us back and support us and want us because they know the kind of education we're providing. It also made me think of something you just mentioned on, like, what are the resources and who do they go to? Usually I start out in the classroom by saying things like, who do you go to first? And it's your peers, right? It's the fellow youth around you. Some of you do have your parents or your guardians, but we don't always have that. And that's why the work that we do is so important, because all I want to give you is medically accurate information for you then to be a resource for your friend. Because you can Google something, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right answer, right?
Yeah. Antonia, do you find that you're meeting up with different obstacles than we've talked about?
I feel like I feel like I do. I meet different obstacles in the community. I think that energy. We're all creatures of energy and vibrations, and sometimes I get a little kick up sometimes. I think that it's always important. Like, we have a new hire, one of our colleagues who is super incredible, super vibrant, just like a lovely person to be around. And we were at an event and we were approached. And when we were approached, it was kind of sort of like, I'm a woman of color. In case no one knew, I'm a woman of color. And so sometimes I get approached with the whole idea of, like, how come you work for this agency, right? Like, why are you working for this agency? And I usually wear a cross. I'm not wearing it today, but I usually wear a cross. And so sometimes I get questions about, like, what's up with the cross and you working for Planned Parenthood, right? And I think oftentimes the response that I unanimously have is, I don't get to judge. You don't get to judge. What I get to do is I get to love, I get to make community, and I don't get paid to judge on any level of what we call life, on what we call experiencing life. I don't get to judge. I don't know what everybody's situation is, right? And I always offer them, like, you don't have to judge too, because I think that sometimes people think it's their responsibility, right? Like, I need to tell people what's right and what's wrong. And I always tell people, let that go. That's not your responsibility. You don't have to take that on. Let it go. You don't get to judge and I don't get to judge. And oftentimes when we have that conversation, and I don't make it about the cross and I don't make it about my color, and I make it about the fact that you are wearing all of this responsibility that no one gave you, let it go. So that's some of the conversations I have when we're in community. I had an opportunity to do some puberty programming with a bunch of beautiful young folks that are just, like, super exploratory, like questions out the wazoo, like really just like this untapped potential of, like, energy, right? Because when you walk into a 5th grade class, I mean, I feel like the room is almost buzzing. Like,
I love it.
Like, you literally can almost feel the buzz in the air.
Yeah.
And I love it when we're able to work together in teams, because, you just get different perspectives. And so I knew that the stakeholders in the room, the school had invited us in, but I know that the stakeholders were, having some Just like, what are they going to come in here and tell our kids? Because they're with these kids for the whole school year. They love these kids. So I know that as being an educator, that I'm coming into a room where these people are invested. They are literally feeling like they need to shield their young people. They need to protect their young people because they're invested, they're stakeholders. And as soon as we got the program underway, my job as an educator is to make sure that this is not about me. This is not about Planned Parenthood. This is about safety. This is about realizing that our bodies are growing and our bodies are changing. And that's where my conversation is always at, right? Like I always say, like I can be present and not make it about Planned Parenthood, because Planned Parenthood's overall objective is really to support the communities that we're in. It's always the community comes first, and then we come as a resource. So I think re-educating the community and giving them different reference points. I think that sometimes people only reference point with Planned Parenthood is just simply abortion, right? So giving them that connection, like, hey, we're human, we're people, we're advocates. We're here to do the hard work. We're here to do the groundwork. We're here to take back the information that we get in the community to enhance our programs, to do better, to move things forward. Because I always say change is a part of our everyday work. We are here to change with our communities and keep moving forward, right? We always want to be onward.
Yeah. Thank you. It's again, I can't help but respond to that with regards to the world in which we live. And if only everyone around us, every politician, every teacher, everybody who's trying to, bring education and awareness and knowledge to the world, but particularly our young people, were willing to put themselves aside and just bring the information forward in a clear, respectful, honoring way. Oh my, we'd be in a very different place. Yeah.
Agreed.
I have to ask about gender and how you two talk about gender. It is clearly a time where I don't love the term gender fluidity. I think I'm not always sure it's respectful, quite frankly. I think it's, but I haven't come up with a different term yet. But, the idea that young folks, well, a lot of folks, whatever age, are beginning to ask themselves how they want to be identified, and that we've lived in a binary world for so long. Mm-hmm. How do you begin conversations about gender with young folks? And let's start with that. How do you begin that conversation? Or do they start the conversation? Where does it usually start?
Well, we like to be inclusive, so we usually start in every space by including pronouns and making everyone know that they're welcome to share what they're comfortable sharing and include that. So we usually start with that. And however someone chooses to identify, we respect that, and we do our very best to make sure that we are addressing them with what they would like. Mm-hmm. That's for the base foundation in our settings.
Mm-hmm. How often are these young folks saying, hey, listen, I really want to be called they, and everyone around me refuses to use that pronoun? How do you help them maneuver a world that's not accepting of them and not as open as you are as you walk in that room?
I've done some parenting program, and I have parents ask me, like, my kid wants to be, my kid is identifying as they, what should I do? And I'm like, you should do what you should do for all people. You respect them, right? They're communicating with you. Someone making a request and advocating for themselves, you should be patting yourself on the back and saying, what a great parent am I? My child has a voice, right? And they're not afraid to have open conversations and be willing to exchange thoughts, right? Be willing to have a conversation about like where they are, where they're located at, right? So I always have to tell parents, when your child is opening up to you and speaking to you about their preferred pronouns, you should be patting yourself on the back because you've done that. We literally just had a program where we were talking about like just engaging with parents. And one of the scenarios was, my kid is going through a phase, right? And I always say like we had some dialogue, and with a room full of educators, you can only imagine the conversations that we have. And so everybody was really offended by the whole idea, like that a parent would say my child is going through a phase or a fad, right? Because in reality, it's like that's not being respectful of where that young person is located, right? And it may not necessarily feel comfortable for the parent, but I always say it's not about you. It's really about supporting your person, your young people, right? So you need to make sure, how do you align in their lives? How do you help to support them? Whether it's a phase, it's a fad, they need to still be supported in that moment. They shouldn't be allowed to be alone, and they should definitely never be suffering in silence, right? Someone starting to question their identity is a normal part of life, right? I mean, I feel like for me, I was a tomboy. I mean, I had bleeding knees, bleeding elbows. I mean, I never wore sandals. And for my dad, that was a huge issue because he was just like, her gender is not aligning. Like, what's going on? And I remember when he started to question me, and I was just like, I'm just trying to live my best life and be on this dirt bike. That's all I want. Gender wasn't an issue for me. So I think that some parents have to remember, when a child asks you a question, the first thing you should do is ask them the question, well, what do you mean about that? Tell me more about that. What do you think it is, right? I offer parents to be curious. Don't think you know everything. Be curious, lean in, be open, because you don't know if they overheard something. You don't know if they researched something, but let them know that you're open to this journey that they are about to embark on.
Yeah. And, I'm a parent. My kids are now in their 20s. And I tell you, sometimes that is so hard to do, right? Because we feel so much fear. We project our own stuff onto our kids. We've had all this noise in our own heads for so long. Maybe it's messages from our own families and communities. Maybe it's from the newspaper. I mean, wherever we get our information. It's really hard to be that open. And but you're absolutely right. I mean, my best parenting moments have been when I have been most ill at ease with what my kids have to tell me, but they've in return said to me, I'm really glad we were able to talk about this. And I walk away from those conversations sometimes literally shaking or ready to cry. Well, I now cry in front of them, or even feel anger and frustration. And often it's about a feeling of like, oh man, I really messed that one up. But you're right. It's kind of speaking to our humanity, embracing people, as you put it, where they are here and now, and gosh knows, I don't know what's happening tomorrow. And so I'm just going to be here now. So I think that those recommendations to all the parents out there, and all the kids out there too, right? Ashley, wouldn't you say, part of what we're also trying to model for these kids is how to be in communication, right? Teaching them skills around talking about sometimes hard things, really hard things, talking about confusing things, talking about things that, oh man, there's so much judgment out there about pregnancy and sex and penises and vaginas and gender and et cetera, et cetera. Like modeling what you two do, or part of what you do is model behavior and way of communication that I just want to applaud and honor, because it is not easy. And that's what we're trying to teach our kids too, right? Because the world is a hard place.
Yeah.
And it's also fair to say, right? We're all learning and evolving and growing together. Like we've been in this work a long time, but when we started this work, this wasn't what we were doing, right? Mm-hmm. Pronouns weren't a thing. Mm-hmm. It's new now. So that's why we all need the grace in working together just to make sure everyone feels safe and is included and involved. And just doing it's not about making ourselves comfortable, right? It's about making the person comfortable who's with us. And I think adults have a harder time with that than the kids.
Absolutely. We are so full of judgment. We're so full of opinions. We're stubborn. Where youthful people are so fluid and excited about change and willing to peek into something. It's usually the adults that kind of slam all those inquiries shut, right? Yeah, yeah. I love that you use the word grace, because so much of what we do is about grace, and I use the word honoring a lot, because I don't always agree with the way someone might be living their lives or the choices they make, but that's not relevant. What's relevant is how I can assist them, promote them, and be in the room with them and give them the information they're seeking. Yeah. So what happens when you have a kid in the room who is, I guess, combative is the right word to ask? Like, what if there's somebody sitting in that corner and they're just shaking their head the whole time, and they're for whatever reason, part of it might be just a feeling of defensiveness or feeling shame or whatever that psychological reason for them, kind of pointing their finger at you. How do you diffuse some of that energy? Because I imagine that sometimes comes into the room.
It definitely can happen. I usually kind of carry on, because I always look at it like my purpose is here to be the vessel to deliver the information, and you just leave with what works for you. And if it's nothing, then it's nothing. And unfortunately, you had to listen to me for a little while. Or maybe I changed your tune and you just aren't letting me see that wall come down yet. More often than not, we don't always know if they're listening. We know they're there. And then they'll say something and you're like, oh, wow, you are listening. You did hear it. But I couldn't read that. I didn't get that energy. But my goal is still to be there and do what I'm there for. So for me, I kind of usually carry on. But I'm also looking at this through the lens of a lot of the times I am in a school setting during the day. So it's different. If we're in the after school setting and it's really rough, usually whomever is in charge of that organization might step in, because we do work with a lot of different populations, where sometimes we're there because they want us to be there, and sometimes we're there because the youth that we're working with are mandated to be there, right? So we never always know all of the circumstances, but we do know what the goal is, and that is to give the education.
Antonia, so just to comment off of what Ashley just shared with us, so those kids who aren't choosing to be there, are we talking about prisons? Are we talking, what environment is it that kids are like have to be there?
Sometimes it's secure detention facilities. Sometimes it's foster care. Sometimes it's after school programs where they may be wanting to go on this really awesome trip, but you have to come here at least 8 of the 10 times that we hold program. So sometimes it's in classrooms, right? Sometimes it's like, well, you can't be truant today. You had to come to health class, and here I am. We're here together. So, a lot of the work that we do, we really work with stakeholders in the community. So a lot of times we get asked to or invited to come to agencies that already have a group of young people. We work with probation. We work with a whole slew of different stakeholders. I've been in the bottom of churches doing programming, right? So those attitudes and those personalities, they come out all types of ways. Sometimes with the stakeholder that's supposed to be working with you may have a difference of opinions. And sometimes what I always say is like, listen, I am not trying to persuade you of anything. And first and most importantly is I come in respect, right? I don't know why you have the point of view that you have. Maybe you have a parent that's been telling you these things, right? Like, I don't know. But those are the conversations that I usually have the most fun with, because we get a chance to learn from each other. And I oftentimes will thank the young person, like, well, thank you for engaging with me. Thank you for being, strong enough and feeling powerful enough to like use your voice. And like sometimes the kids are like you like that didn't upset you. I'm like, well, that comment isn't about me, right? Like, this is not about me. Your opinion is not about me, right? It is about this concept, right? So I'm an adult. I've done a ton of training. And what I know is most important is that, sometimes someone's disposition, it has nothing to do with me. This is the first time we've met. This is the first time I'm in community with you. I'm going to follow our group agreements. And if there's still some barrier between me and you, I appreciate and respect you for being here, for being in this space with me, for respecting me, because just because you don't necessarily agree with what I'm saying doesn't mean that you don't respect me. So for me, I always say to not take it personal, to engage with those individuals because they're like, and look, she didn't even speak to me the whole time I was here, right? So I oftentimes take that opportunity to just engage. Good morning, how are you? Very well. I'm Antonia. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And try to make it a pleasurable experience for them because they're young people. They're dealing with their hormones. And I always say, back in the day, I remember when I was a kid, people would be like, you don't got no problems. What's your problem? I'm like, our young people are dealing with sometimes addiction, sometimes home housing insecurity, sometimes food insecurity, sometimes they didn't sleep all night. You don't know what is going on in that young person's life. And so for me, I never take it personal. And I want to be as warm and welcoming as possible because sometimes you just need one person to smile at you.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I think sorry, go ahead. You're doing great.
No, I just believe that, we need to be mindful about the vibrations that we're sending out in the universe. And just because we're met with unpleasant vibrations, don't mean that we need to match that energy. I wake up in the morning when I'm about to do programming and I've already made a decision on how I'm going to show up in the world. Regardless of what I encounter, I've already made a decision on how I am going to show up in the world. And that's important. I've already chosen, and we all need to choose how we want to show up in the world.
I think there's a role for anger. Anger has a place. Anger has a drive to it when we're in, I'm going to say kind of in combat, right? But so often the right response, particularly with kids, is, that expression of, kill it with kindness, just being kind, just being supportive. And I find what I do to diffuse a lot of anger in the office is laughter. I make some ridiculous joke that isn't even funny, but it's so silly. It's silly, just anything to break the tension in the room because teenagers, man, they are so good at creating tension. Oof. They are so good at it. And, and you walk into a room and here you are the adult, you're the expert, and you think, okay, there's a certain, if you will, there's a certain hierarchy here that's going to protect me. And I think I'm communicating correctly. Like you think, okay, I got this. I know how to handle this. And then you encounter someone who is just angry or sad or fearful or whatever. And to get angry back or to be fearful back is just not the right approach. It's kindness, it's openness, it's support. And again, that's not always easy to do because, we're human too. And sometimes we want to respond with anger, but it's not, particularly in this situation, it's just not the right approach. Or it's never been the right approach for me. And it sounds like it's not the way you guys deal with it either. Yeah.
I usually like to share the power. I want to make sure that the young people that I'm doing programming with understand that this is shared power, right? Like no one is above anyone. I am a visitor. I am a guest. Thank you. This is your home. I am the guest, right? Like I am the person that's on the outside. Like this, like you guys make up these rules, So I like to always make it so that this is shared power. Everybody has power here, right? Like I don't like. A good leader never has to say, like, I'm the leader and everyone needs to listen to me.
That's right. So if we could just pivot a little bit, I just want to talk about pregnancy in the youth. And, Planned Parenthood is certainly known for its interfacing with teen pregnancies. And I certainly know that the American College of OBGYN has really been working for years in trying to work with young women-identified patients who get pregnant. And so can you just share some statistics really about teen pregnancy because it's just a vital time, I think, for us to understand this. When choice is at risk, when contraception is even being questioned in terms of access, and there's just so much bias against vulva havers in terms of race, in terms of misogyny. There's a lot of isms out there. So let's just. I just want to talk a little bit about teen pregnancy and what you're seeing out there. What's the real thing? What's going on?
Mm-hmm. I think there was an uptick in teen pregnancy when we came back. Like when we started, everybody started making a comeback and we were being more in person. Like we got like our community was oozing, like, please come and speak to my young people. Like our schedules were pretty packed when we were able to be back in community and actually going out to community-based organizations. And it
You
was
mean
like,
after COVID? After COVID, you
after
mean?
COVID.
Okay, sorry about
After
that.
COVID. Yep, thank you for
Yeah.
specifying. After COVID, we were in high demand, and I think that it was just simply because our young people weren't engaging in the same ways that they were engaging, and they kind of sort of were going numb. And so the best thing for numbness is like, I need to feel something. So there was, a high peak in, young people being sexually active. Um, but Ashley, what do you think? How's teen pregnancy been going on in your county?
So I always try to take the temperature when I go back into the classroom. I have not seen high rates, but there's
Mhm.
always been about one or two per
Mhm.
year that I've seen. I would say STIs are more of a concern in the post-COVID world and even during COVID because no one had any resources or access to getting protection. But I have felt like I've seen a decline in the teen pregnancy. Now, I don't have an actual statistic for you, which once you said that, I was thinking, oh man. But I definitely think the teen pregnancies are down, but STIs are up. And that is not even just amongst our teens. That's in general.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're certainly seeing that in the GYN offices, and we're seeing a resurgence of infections like syphilis. I mean, infections that we didn't see for decades, decades.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Another thing,
yeah.
another thing I'll say about teen pregnancy is I don't see a lot of teens that are pregnant, but when I'm in programming, I do have a lot of young parents. So I don't see a lot of pregnant teens, but when I'm in programming, and a lot of the time, we're speaking about pregnancy prevention. So what I often do to make space is listen, this is not us making a judgment call, right? Whether you're a parent, you're not a parent, I don't know everybody's background here, right? So I have to make sure that I'm speaking very generally, right? Pregnancy happens. Teen pregnancy happens. I am not here to condemn anybody. I am not here to shame anyone. I want everyone to leave out of this programming feeling better than what they did when they entered it. When I'm speaking about, preventing teen pregnancy, preventing STIs, I'm thinking about in the general terms, but I want to make sure that everybody understands that I am not here to condemn anyone for deciding to start their families early. And I've had young people that come to me like, I want to be a mom. I want to start my family young. And immediately I start to think about the different resources in the community, like family services. Like, well, listen, let me give you a referral to family services, right? Because if you're going to become pregnant, regardless of how much prevention I'm giving you, if you want to become pregnant, what we want to make sure is that you have the resources you need to make sure that that pregnancy is a safe and healthy pregnancy, to make sure that you get the prenatal care that you deserve, to make sure that you get on WIC, so that when you have the pregnancy and the pregnancy comes full term, that you're able to produce, Similac or formula for the baby. So again, my job is to make sure that I listen to the young person and I respond to their need, judgment free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So we're coming to a close, and I have just a couple of questions, and it's a little bit of a pivot to our kind of our personal space. So I find after doing the work that I've done for 30 plus years that I have a hard time not being the fixer, the educator, the helper in the room. And, I would say particularly for my kids, sometimes they're like, just listen, don't fix it. Just listen, don't fix it. Do you guys find yourselves sometimes having, is your professional and personal life so woven that sometimes it's, I don't know, I guess challenging or interesting? Or has anyone in your life, your loved ones ever said, okay, stop teaching me these things? Oh, there's a
I'm a
pause
believer
there.
of choice. I don't think so.
Okay.
Because I mean, again, I was a young inner city kid. I had people constantly telling me what I should do, just, barking orders at me, even though they weren't able to take their own advice. So I always default back to feeling what it was like when I was young and I was trying to figure it out. And someone that was a stakeholder that could listen to me and ask me like, are you looking for advice or do you just want someone to hear you? So for me, I think that when people need help, you can engage the conversation. But when people just need to have a conversation, and so I mean, and I'm sure Ashley has the same experience. Like I'm considered the sex lady, I'm considered the condom lady. So I have like young people in my family, like, hey, I need an appointment. Like, can you get me in? Because I feel like I'm having discharge. I feel like I'm having itching, I'm having scratching, and the first thing I do is say, yes, I can help you. And sometimes, surprisingly, sometimes it's not with Planned Parenthood. I always tell people we are conduits of health care and all in general terms, right? Like we would love if you came and been a part of Planned Parenthood family, but overall, we want people to get the services that they need. So I believe in choice.
Yeah, I want to clarify that my kids were really thrilled that I was willing and able to talk to them about sex and all that stuff. That worked, but it was more about some of the other issues in life, that sometimes I guess I've been critiqued for being too much of a fixer. So, Ashley, have you had that interesting, I don't know, journey in your life? Educator, non-educator?
I think that this is such a special, unique role, personally and professionally, that we were put here to do this because so many can't. And
Bravo, yeah.
I just think even if you don't want to do it, even if you're afraid to have the conversation, we do it. And yes, we have educator on the title, but it's such a different educator. And these kids just come to us because even if they're not necessarily comfortable at first, it's just a way to express themselves and get these things out. And I don't know, it's just so unique. I can't explain it.
Oh, you've done a beautiful job. You've done a beautiful job,
it's
actually.
very special to be able to be the person who does this.
Yeah.
And just be that person for the kids that they know they can come to ask us, to, like Antonia said, to get them help, whether it's something directly related to Planned Parenthood, whether it's not. Yes. However we can help them is just really special. And that means that we've done our job, that they feel comfortable enough asking.
Great. So when you two are not working, I always like to end the program with asking, what gives you pleasure? What do you do that gives you joy in your lives?
That's such a good question.
And we're not necessarily talking about sex here, but we can talk about sex. But, like, what do you do? What do you do when you're off and just gives you joy?
I could start. So, ironically, I really love cooking, and I did go to school for hospitality management. So I still feel like I'm in the right area. I like to try out new recipes and bake and make food, but I also have this crazy thing in my mind where once I see something, I'm not satisfied until I do it. So I'm a little impulsive, so I have to get it done. But I do enjoy being, cooking and trying new things and being able to serve my family with those new things and trying new recipes out with them, because I do have a middle son who loves cooking too, but I'm also learning patience through allowing them in the kitchen space
to make the mess they make. It's great.
I really enjoy taking my time to do that.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you. Antonia?
So I always say, and I guess it's going to sound like when people meet me, they don't necessarily think I'm a homebody, but I was a young person that dealt with housing insecurities. I was a young person that dealt with addiction in my family. And so for me, I really love just fostering a home. I have two boys one is 19 and I had another baby who's 4. And I always say, like, when people tell me about birth control, I'm like, birth control can definitely prevent pregnancy, because when I had my first pregnancy, it wasn't necessarily a choice. I was young, I wasn't on birth control, and I got pregnant. But with the second one, I literally planned that pregnancy. So for me, I'm definitely living in my mom realm, fostering a safe, happy home, just literally really investing what I wish someone would have invested in me, investing that in them. And kids are a full-time job.
The hardest job I've ever done. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. Antonia and Ashley, I can't thank you enough for joining GynoCurious today. I'm so grateful for your time, your expertise, your passion, your skills. You are doing just wonderful, terrific work that just ripples out from individual to individual to community. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's really my pleasure. I also want to thank my producers, Jen Hammoud, Maddie Rosenberg, and to my listeners, and to the Epicurean for housing us in this wonderful studio. Until the next episode, please stay well. Listen to your instincts and intuitions. They are the greatest of teachers, not to be ignored.